Assalamu alaikum. Welcome in program Debate. I am with your host Tariq Khan. Today we will analyze and explore China's involvement and engagement in Africa, China's interest and priorities in Africa, and most importantly, the possible cooperation and partnership Pakistan-China in Africa. It is honor for me to introduce Professor Dr. Dries Velthuizen. You are expert and senior researcher on African studies from University of South Africa. Sir, thank you so much for joining, and you are most welcome in program. Sir, why is the involvement of China in Africa important for Africa, and what Africans really think about China's involvement in Africa, and how do you see China's involvement in Africa in African perspectives? What is your analysis?
This is a very interesting question to start off with. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me here and give me the opportunity to share my thoughts. Well, first of all, China is seen as a very valuable and powerful partner of Africa in the international or global context. In all fora, the international fora like the United Nations and BRICS, China is a good partner to have for Africa. Secondly, I think African countries see looking up to China as in anticipation for the modernization of African economies, reducing the dependence on former colonial powers. There is the hope that China will come with a pragmatic, transparent, and accountable, rules-based economy, very similar to that in China, that is transparent, so that it can replace the current tendency of corruption in many economies on the African continent. It is assumed that China will protect its interests, such as the large-scale infrastructure projects in Africa, and they will do that in a transparent way. However, there is some, despite this optimism for Chinese involvement in Africa, there are some reservations. You know the history of Africa, the exploitation of African resources through the centuries remains a problem. And there's still the reservation that China is doing all this to get access to scarce resources. So that reservation is still there. Then the question is asked by analysts is whether the Chinese government will show preference for governments that comes from former Marxist-orientated liberation movements. Will they protect the interests of the people against the dictatorships in Africa, or will they assist those dictatorships like in Myanmar and in Hong Kong to oppress the people? So that those reservations are there, but it still remains to be seen.
Sir, do you think there are risks and conflicts exist for the African countries about this Chinese involvement and engagement in Africa?
Yes, the main risk, as I mentioned, is the risk of exploitation, of excavating scarce resources, minerals, forests, for the benefit of China. The risk is always there, and the risk is the same for any other major power in the world that scrambles for Africa, as they call it, to take out resources. Those risks always remain. that China is endearing themselves to the African elites, political elites, with the purpose of access to resources. That is the first risk. The second risk is, as I said, how will China react if their friends in African countries are threatened by democracy, by democratic movements, by populist movements, to replace, in many cases we have dictatorships running countries. How will China react if their friends, who are dictators, are threatened through democracy? So those are the risks. Will they protect the people against dictators, or will they go with the dictators? Those two risks are there. In the case of vital interests, like for instance oil resources, there will be competition for control and access over those resources. But I think we look at a more multilateral scenario where people go into alliances with each other and making arrangements on who will do what in Africa. So it's not necessarily energetic, dynamic competition that I foresee, but what we can anticipate where vital resources like energy resources are threatened, that there may be some tensions over that. At this moment, China is coming in as a very positive force. Africans look at it with optimism, although there are the reservations that I mentioned. In general, African countries are very optimistic about Chinese involvement, and there are no indications of, or let me put it this way, there are no major concerns about China's involvement in Africa at this point.
Sir, under what circumstances and how will China exercise influence in Africa by military means, and how do you view China's UN peacekeeping mission in Africa? What is your analysis?
According to the several agreements that China made with African countries and with the African Union, is that they will support military, police, and anti-terrorism activities on an operational level. Now, the indicators are that financial support is at this stage the primary tool used by China to be involved. They support many initiatives, like for instance the African Standby Force and ACRIC within the context of the African Union. They give money to mediation in South Sudan, or they gave money to mediation efforts in the South Sudan. The involvement in AMISOM is supportive. In the case of Mali, it's strongly supportive, but they don't get involved on the operational level. Like for instance, in Mali, they leave the operational tasks to the French forces, and they don't get involved themselves. So they, and we also see a strong support to training initiatives, of which the training center in Tanzania is a good example. It's strongly supported by China. So at this point, there are no indications of aggressive Chinese involvement beyond peacekeeping. But one asks the question, what will happen if their vital interests are seriously threatened by events in a country?
Sir, as you know, China-Pakistan have cordial relations and also working on flagship project of Belt and Road Initiative known as CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. More importantly, Pakistan recently has initiated to focus on Africa by launching Pakistan's Africa policy or Engage Africa policy. Do you think that this Africa policy will be fruitful for Pakistan, and do you think there is any possibility of cooperation and partnership between China and Pakistan in Africa? What is your analysis?
I think in the multilateral context, it will be good for Pakistan, as for any other country, to work with China as part of multilateral international arrangements, for instance, in peacekeeping missions. The success of collaboration will, of course, depend on the ongoing relations between Pakistan and China. And without claiming to be expert on those relations, I think the role of, or the orientation of Pakistan towards the USA in the future will be strongly determining the relations with China. But working together in Africa, I don't see any problems with that, especially in terms of multilateral missions and arrangements. Overall, I think China is not a newcomer to Africa. Since the beginning of the century, it focus on Africa as in the interests of China. We must always remember that in international relations, the interests of the country is the primary objective. I think in overall, Africa benefit extensively from Chinese involvement. For me, a main issue is that it gives African countries options when it comes to development. They don't have to rely on models from Western origin that forces them into liberal democracies as a prerequisite for development. China comes with a new, they come with a new perspective that makes development independent, especially post-conflict development in African countries, independent from political models. And I think many people find that encouraging. But in general, I think Africa is doing very well. The way they managed the COVID pandemic, for instance, I'm very impressed to see how most African countries dealt with it. It is not easy. It wasn't easy, and it is still not easy. But there are so many reasons for optimism for African development.
Sir, thank you so much for your valuable thoughts and precious analysis on China in Africa. And thank you so much again.
It was a pleasure, sir.